Yes, hey, hi there. Marianne Williamson. I want to do another video on her. This is like my fourth or fifth one, somewhere in there. I just got this book, 1992. The author is Elena Umanon, and it was published by St. Martin's Press, a very established press from New York. St. Martin's Press on, real serious matter for cultural and spiritual, philosophical interest to the American public particularly. And this book is about her life. It's about her message and about her miracles is the subtitle. It's the only biography that I know of or serious, actual, systematic writing about Marianne Williamson, who's now dropped out of the 2020 Democratic campaign, running for president, running for leader of the Democratic Party, dropped out on January 10th. She's become this international figure. I'm writing a book on her, which is part of what this video is about, sharing a little bit about what I'm working on and how I analyze the Marianne Williamson phenomenon. So that biography is filling me in on some of the gaps. They did a lot of interviewing, Elena did, and people that knew Marianne Williamson seems to be mostly all friends, all acquaintances, colleagues, family members. So it's very biased towards a very positive, not that critical of an outlook, or by critical I mean not negative critical, but a good critique. It's really more an ongoing endorsement of this interesting, which she is, celebrity and important person in Americans' history. And I argue that as well. I think others have as well, that I'm researching on. Whether you think that's in the cultural sphere, or the historical sphere, the political sphere, the psychological sphere, and so on. She is an important figure today. So I am going to be writing the second biographic type of book after Umanos, if that is, no one else publishes. In the meantime, my book will come out probably this summer by New York publisher Peter Lang Press. Yeah, so mine will be the second book, very systematic, mine much more in-depth, much more a case study of, I'll read you my abstract to the book, and that will give you a feel for it. And then I'm just going to take one of her recent talks, just came up today. She's talking with an interviewer host, and it's a video. And I'm going to analyze it just as a sample, really quickly, of how I take the Marianne Williamson phenomenon, presidential phenomenon, because that's kind of the time I'm focusing on it, not her whole life. And I'm not doing a traditional biography, more a kind of intellectual presidential biography analysis case study of the phenomenon that she represents. And in contrast with the Trump phenomenon, makes it a very interesting book. I think it will be. We'll see. I look forward to it coming out. I will present on that video as well in the last half of the video today. Thanks for tuning in. My name is R. Michael Fisher, educator, artist, philosopher, virologist, many labels, author, obviously, here. The Marianne Williamson Presidential Phenomenon. That'll be the title of the book, probably. Subtitle is A Cultural Revolution in a Dangerous Time. The most important national election in U.S. history is underway right now. Just finished the Super Tuesday in the primaries. And that's what Marianne Williamson's talking about in the video I'm referring to just in a moment after I finish this abstract. So if President Trump wins again, the consequences, perhaps, is on some people's opinion, will be devastating, or at least for others, that may not be the case. They may be very joyed for the new change, the new kind of leadership that's happening. An important story, however, is to be told. Again, whatever my biases are towards who should win or who shouldn't win, that's not the point of this book. But I am interested in the story, the important story unfolding in a tumultuous and dangerous time in U.S. history and politics. Many people feel that, not just me. There are a rare few fearless leaders, as I say, of the good kind that appear on the historical stage with such provocative style that catches near everyone's attention. Trump and Marianne Williamson have been shown to be so-called opposites, but also oddly, they're very alike. I dedicate sort of half of a chapter to that mirroring of their likeness, and it's quite astounding what I've been discovering. In the 21st century, Marianne Williamson has stepped up to show she is capable and willing to be president of the United States in 2020. Many people are supportive, and that fan and voter base is growing. However, many are puzzled by her, and many are the critics on the left and right and in between. The book is a thorough study of Williamson's speeches, writings, interviews, and others who have written about. It will document and analyze her supporters and critics' thoughts and feelings based on what they have written, performed, and published. It records history while it is being made. I want this book to be part of history, and I want it to influence history. I want it to possibly influence the election. In my heart of hearts, I would love to see that happen. Who knows? The battle, capital B, between capital L love and capital L fear, pivotal to Williamson's theology, philosophy, and psychology, and the role of fearlessness, which is my interest. I will add into that love-fear battle that she talks about a lot, are central themes of the author and his views. Williamson's love campaign, her politics of love, deserves not just vilification, in my view, but it deserves to be studied and critiqued for future reference. Take it serious. The author offers support and criticism of how Williamson's leadership and her team, the Marianne 2020 team, so-called during this campaign, could have done things different so as to be more successful in the presidential campaign itself. The big idea throughout the book is to emphasize, as does Williamson's teachings, that spirituality and politics ought not never be separated completely, as have religion and the state in modernity. If we truly desire more than mere reforms of society, but desire a transformation, as Marianne Williamson and her followers do, to a better, more progressive, and more liberated world, I trust this will be a book that will help inform and help us to make decisions about, critique, what is actually going on, not just during when Marianne Williamson was president, candidate, but now as she's following up, right? So she's not giving up. She didn't stop. She dropped out of the race. She's now finally endorsed Bernie Sanders, and that's, her ongoing work right now. Seems to be quite full-time for her to make sure that's her aim, is to get Trump out of the White House. So let's turn now to this really recent, I'll put a link for this recent little interview she had. I'm taking 4 minutes to analyze, to show you how the book I'm creating and how I think. You'll see these kinds of analysis within the book when it comes out. And I just take 4 minutes of this interview. What's the title of it? Wrote it down here somewhere. It's called Marianne Williamson on Yahoo Finance for Super Tuesday. It's available on YouTube. So let me start with my really brief analysis of half of this 8-minute kind of interview she does. So I'm quoting her in the interview. I think it is very unfortunate that this whole thing has become a propaganda war. She's talking about the Democratic challenge and going on between Bernie and Biden and so on. Has become a propaganda war rather than the huge contest of ideas that it should be. End of quote. Should, I always pick that up. It's a moral imperative, and it's her bias for that moral direction that we should be going. And she's telling the Democratic Party where it should be going. And she's not afraid or ashamed or quiet about her shoulds and shoulding on other people. So this is an expression of her idealism. First, her moralism with the should. She's a big moralist. And then her idealism. So where's the idealism in that sentence? Because it's in the phrase, a propaganda war rather than a huge contest of ideas. So she's a big ideas person. See, contest of ideas. That's what she fundamentally wants. First, in the democratic process, she believes that's the ideal of a good democracy, and believes that that can be traced back to the founders of the American Constitution and freedom of independence and so on of the United States of America. I don't disagree with any of that. In fact, I'm quite interested in ideas myself, and you can see my analysis here is actually very about ideas. It's about her ideas, how she expresses those ideas, and how those form these discourses of power, knowledge, and moral implication, ethical development, if you want, toward how she would lead, wants people to lead, and how she's going to support leaders of that kind of progressive movement, which she identifies as progressivism. She says she's a progressivist on the democratic leftist side. So that notion of putting ideas before so many other things, which she often put in her campaign as well, ideas is what she wanted people to talk about. Big ideas, big change, fundamental change, big fundamental ideas, including the nature of our worldview and where we're going as a planet and the future of life itself. Those big ideas is what is important to her beyond. It's her priority. Okay, so that's her valuation. I call her an idealist in that sense. Idea, you can see, is in that word ideal, and that will come back later. And now to the next point, brings out another one of her discourses that she uses. I think the people could handle all this mess of the elections and propaganda, but everything is confused by the propaganda, end of quote, she says. So here she's doing her metaphysical, political metaphysical part of herself, that is the doctor, metaphysician, which is the physician of the interiors world, the world of ideas, right? Idealism, ideas. And she's not a physical doctor in that sense. She's a quote, psychological, spiritual doctor, if you will. And that's where she thinks she's now using propaganda very quickly in this talk for identifying would be a political pathology, a political ideology or idolatry that is symptomatic of a kind of disease, which she's not afraid of using any of those terms, and she does, as I've been researching more and more. If you listen to her, you'll hear her doing her diagnoses. She quite likes to be the doctor, and prophet in some ways as well. So this is probably not much different by constantly calling what the Democratic Party is doing right now in their campaign to pick a leader to go up against Trump. She continually disses, critiques, and is very angry at the way the Democratic Party is operating, the powers to be within that, and she calls this big elite matrix of what has happened with money and the Democratic Party and so on. We'll go into that. So she says the basic debate, I just wanted to say, is that the basic debate, she says, is messed up by propaganda, it's confusing people. And I said, well, that's kind of interesting because Trump's constantly using right now everything that the Democratic Party throws at him, he's calling a hoax. So he says, oh, it's another Democratic hoax, and which is another word, hoax, propaganda. So those two, you see those two leaders, Marianne and him, I'm not saying they're the only ones, but they have this very interesting mirroring. They look like opposites. One represents fear, Trump, one represents love, politics of fear. But they love to use these same pathological labels. everything's a hoax, everything's propaganda. All right, so Marianne then just sort of says in the interview, you know, the moderates just want to tweak within the Democratic Party, and tweaking's not going to be good enough. She says we're in a very dramatic time. We have to change fundamentals. And she uses this kind of term, and though that's the more progressive wing, and that's the battle, right? Moderates, progressives within Democratic, Biden representing the moderates, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren representing, for example, and Marianne Williamson, if she was still in the campaign, would be representing that. And she's, of course, endorsing Bernie officially, but she's also a fan of Elizabeth Warren, she says. So then let's go on to the next statement where she says, I'm paraphrasing somewhat, but I will quote as well. She says she's not a believer in the polls because the host says, well, you know, the polls are saying the American people generally are more in favor. They think Biden can beat Trump rather than say a Bernie can beat Trump. And Marianne, well, what do you think? She responds, well, typically she's done this all through the campaign for the last year. Plus, I've watched her. When people talk about polls, she just like disses them almost immediately, like they're unimportant data to her. And I think that's rather dismissive, but that's the way she does it. And she responds, quote, I personally think that what is going to beat Trump is passion and conviction. And she goes on, talk about that a little bit. So passion and conviction. This is her discourse of emotionalism. And this is really hooked to, I think, a kind of romanticism underneath that. I'm not going to go into that in here. I do somewhat in my book. There's a discourse she favors in that direction, and affect, feelings, emotions, right? Also, there's a feminist stream of her valuing and philosophy there too. She believes that's what really is going to change. So let me just go to another quote that ties in and connects with why she uses this emotionalism and she likes it so much. Quote, we have to understand that Donald Trump has introduced into this country an era of political theater, and we will not be going back, she says. Political theater. Okay, because I've read enough of her biography and enough of her life of interests and what she's really good at, she is Miss Political Theater herself. You watch her during the campaign at any time when she gets wound up. She's as theatrical as anybody, Trump included, and she's right up there with the top. Why? Because that was her background. That was what she actually started. I think 6 years old, she already got her first acting teacher in theater. And I'm talking about good acting teacher. She was living in California near Hollywood and so on. She's born and raised in this kind of environment that theatrics, that was her favorite in drama. She hung out in drama right up to high school. She directed and acted in a major Broadway play in high school. Okay, we're not talking about somebody with little competency in theater. We're talking about serious. And the interviews from Umano's biography here in 1992 on her show just how much theater was important, how good she is at it. Again, eventually became a cabaret, a singer, tried it professionally a little while in her 20s and so on. Didn't continue that. So theatrical bias, emotion, right, is everything about theater. It's about dramatization, extremes, and hyperbole, and so on. So she kind of likes the whole theatrics of politics in that way. Fourth quote, the idea that some moderate, rational, this contest is being played out on a level of energy, that's what Trump brings, and that's what we need to bring today, energy, right? So emotional conviction, energy. This is like a coach to a sports team, any kind of team. It's like the director of a theater group talking to their people before they go on stage. You can hear what I call the motivational, inspirational coaching cheerleader. Well, she actually was a cheerleader in high school, and she was definitely in her profession a coach, a life coach, uh, ministry type coach as well. And she is known as a top-selling author, motivational speaker, writer. So she's interested in that deeper level of motivation. I think that's all great. As I say, those are, to me, what all start to tie together as her favorite ways, her discourses on the political world. And like it or not like it, is it effective, is it not? I think it has problems, all of these discourses. And that's more in-depth analysis that won't be in this video, how I critique more specifically the downfall or the shadow sides of those impulses in her, those default discourse patterns that she likes, her values, her personality. Okay, and then the last fifth quote, and I'll end here. She says, "We shouldn't be so afraid. The fact that Bernie Sanders has that, because Bernie has that in support of the genuinely democratic ideals," there's ideals again, "that the Democratic Party traditionally stands for." So she's talking about this energy, this, not a rational moderate, as she says. Well, all of that makes us beg to ask the question, well, if it's not rational, what is it? Oh, a little rational, a lot of emotion, is that what you want? And so where do you have that balance? Where does she have that balance? Or does the political theater not really care about having a balance of that, but just having enough impact rhetorically, emphatically, affectively to win, to do a good performance, right? To win the audience, to win the football game, to win an election. Some of her biases, but again, back to the ideals there in that end of that quote, Democratic Party traditionally stands for. So even though she says, I am a progressive in this video, in this 4 minutes, she's very clear. She's to that side of changing foundations, right? That's what she talks about. We need big change, transformation. That's changing fundamentals. It's funny here because I find it's interesting. She says, lastly, "I believe we need more than a fundamental approach to the course correction." I thought you were all about changing fundamentals. And then she says, we need more than a fundamental approach to the course correction of the current political scene. So, and I don't understand what she's saying there at all. I think she either just messed up her language, which, because she speaks so quickly and so passionately, if you actually listen to her actual words sometimes, and other people have critiqued her on this, she's actually quite inconsistent or even illogical, and non sequiturs of all kinds appear in her language. But, if you're out to just affect people and win them over, inspire them, motivate them, some of that logical, rational reasoning sensibility to language, words, she may not pay that much attention to for various reasons, and that may have a really upside to it. And I'm not a total word person myself. I'm a visual artist, actually, and a performer myself, a musician. But the question is, balancing that, and how much of rational, how much irrational or irrational, somewhere in the middle. So she's kind of a progressive traditionalist, and that's that moralist that I pointed out in the very early first part of the discourse. The shoulds, the shoulding, she's really good at shoulding, and she's good at saying we shouldn't be so afraid. See, there it comes again. We shouldn't, and then she'll use we must, you must, should, must. And I see her sometimes as actually, she's quite traditional, and I don't think she's embarrassed about being traditional. Another topic. So all of that, thank you for listening to that quick little overtake of her discourse in a 4-minute interview. You can go listen to the rest of the 4-minute interview if you like, and maybe you'll come up with some other ideas. Feel free to share them here on the below on the link. Let's keep watching Marianne Williamson, and I trust that you might be interested in my book. And as it progresses, I'll probably put up a few more interviews. And once the book's out, of course, I'll do a lot more to promote some of the ideas within that book. Okay, good to talk to you again.